GoForThe2.com, and with the Week 3 college predictions, what a weekend of college football in week number 2. Didn't disappoint. Major top 25 upsets. We saw teams get pushed to the limit, including the Alabama Crimson Tide. They prevailed 20-19 over the Texas Longhorns. We saw Texas A&M lose outright as an 18.5-point favorite to App State. And we even saw Scott Frost lose outright to Clay Helton and Georgia Southern as a 21.5-point favorite. Cost Scott Frost his job, and now the team turns to interim head coach Mickey Joseph to lead them this coming Saturday against the Oklahoma Sooners in Lincoln. We'll see how this weekend plays out. If you want all the selections, tune into Carver and Lisi every night. Sirius Channel 159, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern. Carver and Lisi, Sirius Channel 159. We go through all the slate, NFL, college throughout the week. And then on Saturday, the studio show, College Football Today, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. We get you covered for kickoff. Sirius Channel 159, Sports Grid Radio, Sports Grid TV. Tune in every Saturday, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, sportsgrid.com and Sirius Channel 159. And then Monday through Friday, Carver and Lisi, 10 p.m. to 12 midnight. Every night we have you covered. Let's jump it right into the video. The video will have all the picks up on GoForThe2.com. They're marked to Monday spreads. 3 underdogs, 3 favorites. And then obviously if you want others, you can hit me up on Twitter at GoForThe2, the number 2. I'll try to answer as many as I can and put out picks as the week progresses. Let's jump right into it. We saw Wake Forest jump out early and often on Vanderbilt. They jumped out to a 21-10 first half lead, never looked back. The line opened up at 6.5, jumped up to 13.5 by kickoff. Sam Hartman, their quarterback, showed no rust in that ball game, completed 18 of 27 passes, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Very impressive effort, but it was the defense for Wake Forest that really held with Vanderbilt and Michael Wright and Swan in check, the quarterbacks for the Commodores. They held the Commodores to only 113 yards on the ground, 2 of 10 in terms of third down conversions, 2 of 13 in third down conversions. That was a dynamic effort by the Wake defense, and they now have to step up against a very run-heavy attack in terms of the Liberty Flames. I was on Liberty last week. That was one of the picks on the video against UAB. I thought that Hugh Freeze had the coaching advantage over Brian Vincent. They pounded the rock for 188 yards on the ground. Defense stepped up. Their quarterback, Caden Salter, played very well, 202 yards through the air, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He's making the proper decisions, and as long as Liberty can run the football, I think they're going to be in this ball game from start to finish. Like I mentioned, they're pounding the rock for 216 yards per game, 4.9 yards per carry, but more importantly as well, their ability to run the football has preserved their defense. You look at the defense heading into this ball game, 29% third down defense, holding opposing offenses basically 3 of every 10 attempts. But more importantly, the secondary has played lights out, only giving up 126 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks, no touchdowns allowed in the passing game, and 3 interceptions. So they're opportunistic. They travel on the road. I look for them to run the football, shorten the game just the way they did against UAB, and catching 16.5. I like Liberty as a potential live dog in this matchup. Hugh Freeze has stepped up in recent years against ACC opponents. 2 years ago in the COVID year, he covered all 3 games, won at Syracuse, he won at Va Tech, pushed NC State in Raleigh to the limit 15-14, only lost 24-21 with Malik Willis at the helm last year in the Carrier Dome against Syracuse, but they were a favorite in that ball game. Now they're a double-digit underdog, and Wake does have Clemson on deck in week number 4. There's always the potential look ahead with the Clemson Tigers coming to Winston-Salem. I like Liberty catching 16.5 week number 3 of the college football season. Let's turn our attention to the late night kickoff in the Coliseum. We have USC dominating Stanford early and often. They built a huge first half lead. You look at their quarterback, Caleb Williams, 20 of 27, over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Jordan Addison, lights out performance, 7 receptions, a $172 and a touchdown. Just a dynamic performance as well in terms of the offensive line. They pounded the rock for 164 yards on the ground, averaged 4.6 yards per carry, and they cruised to the 41-28 victory over Stanford. Now, Stanford was able to pound the rock for over 200 yards in that matchup. 221. They averaged well over 5 yards per carry, and I think that that's the MO or the situation and the breakdown to look at this weekend with a very blue-collar team in Fresno State coming to town. Fresno State did not look good or in terms of the covering aspect against Cal Poly. They went toe-to-toe with a very physical, run-heavy offensive attack in Oregon State. They were a pick'em in that matchup and lost out basically outright, depending upon where you look. Some books had a 1.5 number on Fresno State. They lost 35-32. Very close ball game. Their quarterback, Jay Kaner, stepped up. Dynamic performance, completed over 60% of his passes, 362 yards, 1 touchdown. They pounded the rock for 132 yards on that Beaver front seven. I think that's the recipe in this ball game going on the road to face top-ranked USC. I think that's the matchup. Fresno State will not fear USC. They went toe-to-toe with UCLA last year, not afraid of Pac-12 opponents in any capacity. I think they're able to travel well, run the football, shorten the game, and I think Jay Kaner might have the quarterback advantage heading into this ball game. As dynamic as Caleb Williams is, I still like the experience of Jay Kaner going on the road. They're catching points in this matchup. It's a late-night kick. They have to be within 12.5. I think Fresno State can do it. I like their defense in terms of third down defense as well. I think they might have an advantage over the offense of USC, force them to methodically work down the field. And I like the Bulldogs to be a live dog Saturday night in the Coliseum in that ball game. Another intriguing battle takes place in terms of Western Michigan. Now, Western Michigan got the victory over Pittsburgh as basically a 14.5, 15-point underdog. The line was as high as 17.5 last year with Kenny Pickett. They jumped out early, put up a 44 spot on that Pitt defense and never looked back in terms of the road win in Heinz Field. Now they come back home. They're catching 10.5 points. This is more about Pittsburgh than it is about Western Michigan right now. The biggest thing about Pittsburgh is, will Keaton Slovis go? There's some reports he will, some reports he won't. If it's Nick Patty, I think Pitt's at a huge disadvantage in this ballgame. Now, Keaton Slovis stepped up in the first half, 182 passing yards. He threw a touchdown. They looked very good in terms of the rhythm and sync in the passing attack. He got those wide receivers involved. They looked like they had a rhythm in the first half of that ball game. Second half, when Patty came in, they were non-existent. He did not look good in terms of that ball game. Completed 9 of 20 passes. 9 of 20 for 74 yards, could not convert on third down conversions. Pitt only converted 4 of 18 third down conversions, and this is an offense only converting 30% of their third down opportunities. On the flip side, you have a Western Michigan defense holding opposing offenses to 28% of third down attempts, and I think that's the matchup looking as Pitt goes on the road, coupled with the fact that Pitt played a rivalry game week number 1. They went into overtime against Tennessee in a top 25 ball game. From an emotional perspective, that takes a lot out of a team, and now they have to go on the road to Western Michigan. I don't like that spot for the Pitt offense and, more importantly, the Pitt defense. Pitt stepped up and held Hendon Hooker and that rushing attack in check. 91 yards, only 2.6 yards per carry. But this offense looks a lot different at the helm with Nick Patty than it did with Keaton Slovis. I like Western Michigan to run the football. I like them to sustain drives at home. Look for them to force turnovers and look for them to cover this 10.5-point number against the Pitt Panthers Saturday afternoon in Western Michigan. Let's turn our attention to the Big Ten. 3 Big Ten teams that I'm going to pick on this video. We're taking all favorites. So let's jump into the matchup in Bloomington. It's Indiana, 6.5-point favorite over Western Kentucky. You look at the quarterbacks, Bazelak and obviously Austin Reed for Western Kentucky. Austin Reed, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, over 700 yards, completed over 60% of his passes. Bazelak completed over 60% of his passes, 527 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You look at the rushing attack of Indiana heading into this ballgame. They're averaging about 135 yards on the ground, averaging about 264 yards through the air. With Connor Bazelak, he's a better quarterback and a major upgrade to where they had last year, at least in the first couple of weeks of the regular season. But I like the rushing attack of Sean Shivers. He's averaging 5.2 yards per carry, over 200 yards on the ground. And I think that's the matchup going up against a finesse type of defense in Western Kentucky. Statistically, Western Kentucky is very good against the run, only allowing 128 yards on the ground. And they did go toe-to-toe with Indiana last year, losing 33-31. But they did play Austin Peay. They did play Hawaii, not big physical offensive lines. And that's why I favor Indiana in this matchup. I think it's way too much physicality in terms of the run game for Indiana going up against a smaller defensive front. I think they're able to sustain drives. I like the front seven in terms of Indiana going up against the offensive line of Western Kentucky. I think they dominate this ball game from start to finish and win it anywhere from 14 to 17 points Saturday afternoon in Bloomington. Another big matchup takes place in Syracuse. You have Purdue at 1-1. You have Syracuse at 2-0. Syracuse has over-exceeded expectations in the first 2 weeks of the regular season. They laid a big number against UConn, dominated that matchup 48-14. They won week number 1 against Louisville, and Dino Babers is 2-0 on the year. Let's not forget, Dino Babers entering this year was 29-43 overall as head coach entering year number 6 in Syracuse. He was only 3-15 against the ACC the past couple of years. Now he's 4-15. But this offense is humming with Schrader, their quarterback, at the helm. They're averaging 277 yards through the air. They're challenging defenses over the top. Sean Tucker averaging 4.5 yards per carry. He's rushed for over 200 yards on the season as well. And they're going to try and challenge Purdue in this ballgame. From a defensive perspective, Syracuse only giving up 10 points per game. Very solid in terms of the back end, holding opposing offenses under 200 yards passing per game. But Malik Cunningham and Louisville looked out of sync week number 1, and UConn did not look good week number 2 in terms of the passing attack. So are those numbers a little bit skewed heading into this ballgame? They possibly might be with Aiden O'Connell and the Purdue offense coming into Syracuse. Purdue is averaging well over 360 passing yards heading into this ballgame. 43 points per game. O'Connell has completed 60% of his passes. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions on the year. He's played very well within the scheme, but it's the Purdue front seven that I like heading into this ballgame. From a physicality perspective, in terms of run support, they're only allowing 74 rushing yards per game. I think they can neutralize Sean Tucker, force Schrader into long third down conversions, and I give the edge to the Purdue defense in this matchup. They're only allowing 30% third down conversions to opposing offenses. I think that's the matchup going up against Schrader. If Syracuse cannot run the football, I like the defensive front of Purdue in this ballgame. I think Jeff Brom has the coaching advantage over Dino Babers, and laying only 1.5 in this ballgame, I favor Purdue. Think they win this ballgame by double digits Saturday afternoon against the Syracuse Orange. Last battle on the board is a late night kick in Seattle. We saw this line flip between Michigan State and the Washington Huskies. Earlier in the regular season, Michigan State opened as a 1-point favorite. It ballooned to 3, and now Michigan State is a 3.5-point underdog in this ballgame. 2 good quarterbacks. You have Peyton Thorne from Michigan State. He has his 2 big play wide receivers in terms of Coleman and Jalen Reed that have combined for 14 receptions, 227 yards, and a touchdown. Peyton Thorne completing around 56% of his passes. He goes on the road to face one of the most lethal secondaries right now in terms of statistics for Washington. They're holding opposing offenses to 33% third down conversions, and their offense in terms of Michael Penix is lights out. They're averaging 384 passing yards per game. They're rushing for about 150 yards on the ground, over 500 yards of total offense, and I think that's the matchup going up against the Spartans. Can Michael Penix challenge that Michigan State defense, giving up 198 yards per game through the air through 2 weeks? Really weren't challenged by Western Michigan week number 1. It was a wet track. And then obviously last week they dominated the competition en route to the big win. But we knew that Michigan State had one of the worst pass secondaries last year. That's why they got abused by Purdue, put up 500 total yards through the air with Aiden O'Connell when they were ranked number 4 in the college football playoff, and Ohio State abused them as well over the top. Look for Washington to challenge Michigan State vertically. That'll open up potentially the rushing attack for the Huskies, and I think the Huskies do get the victory as a home favorite. I think it might be close for a half, but I do feel that Washington wins this ball game anywhere from 10 to 13 points Saturday night in Seattle. I think Seattle's a very difficult place to play as well. We'll see how it plays out. Again, have a great week, everyone. All the picks will be up at goforthechew.com. Also, listen to the radio show every night, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern, and then college football today, this coming Saturday. See you then. Have a great week.